Well, for sure, in the Sufi mystics, people read their poetry, and they often think it's great, kind of erotic or sensual poetry. But most of the time, they're talking about God. Like most of the time, that's what they're talking about. Like,
Sure.
They're kind of, and you see that in Dante as well. Like where, and this is the idea of sublimating. I mean, people degrade the idea of sublimating, but I think it's actually an interesting possibility, which is that we have in us these erotic power, this erotic energy, and that if it's directed, then it reaches its full potential. And there are different levels of direction. So it's like the idea that if you direct your love towards one person, then it concentrates and it becomes deeper and it actually yields greater goods. But that ultimately that ends up bringing you into something transcendent, and the possibility that the highest form of eros is directed towards God Himself. You see that in the mystics, both in Dante and in the Sufi mystics, where they actually transform their energy into something higher. And it's something like for a lot of the young guys, it feels like nobody's talking about that with them, and I even like I tell a lot of these young guys, like, this sexual energy that you have, it can be directed.
Sure.
It's like the sexual energy you have, it's actually that which you can use to do good in the world, that you can also like even accomplish your career. They used to say, the salesmen used to, in the way that they were trained, they used to say, like, don't have sex the night before you close, because you need that sexual energy to be directed right towards something else. And it's like they don't say that anymore, but there's something about understanding that, which is that this energy that we have, it is in a way, it is ultimately sacred if it's directed properly.
Yeah, I think Rabbi Gaffney, who I study with, he says that when the erotic is reduced to the sexual, it collapses. The sexual collapses under a weight that it cannot bear, because the erotic is designed to be directed towards all of life, and that's what Rumi was talking about when he was talking about the great beloved. But if you don't know that, you think he's talking about a lover, like a human lover, right? You think he's talking to his girlfriend, but no, he's talking to God, and God as his girlfriend in every gust of wind, in every flap of his, robe, in every glass of wine, and so he's actually found a way to channel this, erotic impulse into the whole world, and that's allowed him the apparent transcendence. And of course, we didn't know him. He could have been a curmudgeon who was just great at poetry. But I imagine that it was authentic through and through.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I mentioned Dante before, but you see that explicitly in Dante, because he starts he starts with poetry, right? He starts with Virgil. It's like Virgil is the thing that draws him into the language of love. It's as if he perceived the possibility of love and eros in Virgil and Virgil's poetry. But then that leads him to an actual person, right? Beatrice. But his love for Beatrice is not fulfilled. Like it's stunted. He doesn't get anywhere like with her. And so that love gets carried up into higher versions until he encounters the Virgin as, let's say, the ultimate vision of the feminine, and the ultimate thing that his love of Beatrice was driving him towards. And then that opens the door up into, the Trinity itself. And so, yeah, definitely. I think that this is something that many of the mystics have talked about.